How a narcissist can sit across from you and explain that every single person they dated this year somehow betrayed them is one of the great mysteries of modern life. Not one person made a mistake, not two people misunderstood them, but everyone failed them completely. At some point the numbers stop lying, but the narcissist keeps talking. They tell the story like it's breaking news every time. There's no reflection, no pause, no curiosity about patterns, just wide-eyed confusion mixed with confidence. They say it slowly too, like they really want you to feel bad for them. You almost start nodding before your brain catches up. That's when you realize this story has been told before, probably word for word. In the narcissist's mind, life is not something they participate in. Life is something that keeps happening to them without permission. They are never the cause, only the survivor. They don't walk through consequences, they trip into them accidentally. A narcissist could spill their own drink while holding it and still look offended. They'll stare at the mess like it appeared out of nowhere. Then they'll look up at you with genuine confusion, not embarrassment, confusion, as if reality itself betrayed them. Somehow you'll end up apologizing for being nearby, and they'll accept that apology calmly. Accountability does not scare a narcissist because fear requires awareness. Accountability simply does not register. It's like trying to explain color to someone who insists everything is grayscale. They hear the words, but nothing sticks. You'll say, "That hurt me," and they'll hear, "You're attacking my character." You'll say, "I need to talk about this," and they'll hear, "You're trying to control me." They translate responsibility into danger instantly. That's why every conversation feels tense, even when voices stay calm. Something important is being avoided at all costs, and that something is self-reflection. A narcissist does not want to be right occasionally. They need to be right constantly. Being wrong even once threatens their entire identity. So instead of admitting fault, they change the framing. Suddenly the issue isn't what happened, it's how you brought it up. Now the tone is the problem. Now the timing is disrespectful. Now you're focusing on the wrong thing. The original issue quietly disappears. You leave the conversation wondering how you got so far away from the point. They leave feeling victorious and misunderstood. That imbalance is not accidental. You'll start preparing for conversations like they're major events. You rehearse in your head before you speak. You soften words that don't need softening. You plan pauses and exits. You tell yourself to stay calm and grounded. You walk in believing clarity is possible. You walk out feeling like you lost track of time. Nothing was resolved. Nothing was acknowledged. But somehow you feel responsible. That's the first sign you're dealing with a narcissist. Reality starts slipping, and you're the only one noticing. Once you spend enough time around a narcissist, you realize they don't experience themselves as harmful people. They experience themselves as reactive people. In their mind, nothing ever starts with them. Everything they do is a response to something someone else did first. They didn't hurt you, they were pushed. They didn't lie, they were cornered. They didn't disrespect you, they were misunderstood. This logic feels airtight to them. It also explains everything they do, and it makes arguing with them feel impossible. This is why conversations with a narcissist feel so strange. You're talking about impact, and they're talking about intent. You're explaining how something affected you, and they're explaining why they didn't mean it that way. They treat intention like it cancels outcome. If they didn't mean to hurt you, then you're not allowed to be hurt. Your feelings become evidence against you. The calmer you are, the more suspicious they become. Calm sounds like manipulation to someone who survives on emotional chaos. So they escalate while insisting they are being reasonable. A narcissist never answers the question you ask. They answer the question they wish you asked. You say, "Why did you do that?" And they respond with, "Why are you always assuming the worst?" You say, "Can we stay on this topic?" And they say, "You're always trying to control the conversation." The subject keeps sliding away like it's coated in oil. You reach for clarity and grab confusion instead. After a while, you forget what you were even trying to resolve. They remember exactly what they avoided. That's not accidental behavior. This is also why narcissists sound convincing when they explain themselves to other people. They don't sound angry. They don't sound cruel. They sound wounded and logical at the same time. They tell the story calmly, leaving out just enough information to appear reasonable. They present themselves as someone who tried their best. Anyone listening casually would side with them, especially if that listener doesn't live inside the relationship. Context is where the truth lives, and narcissists never provide it. If a laboratory wanted to study narcissism, they wouldn't bring the narcissist in for questioning. They would bring you, because in the narcissist's internal world, you are the problem. You are the confusing one. You are the emotional one. You are the person who made everything complicated. They see themselves as someone enduring difficult people over and over again. That belief never changes. New relationship, same conclusion. Different face, same villain. One of the most confusing moments with a narcissist is when they appear to take responsibility. It feels rare and powerful when it happens. They might say something like, "I know I wasn't perfect," or "I probably could have handled that better." Your nervous system relaxes for a second. You think maybe this time is different. You think maybe growth is happening. But that feeling never lasts long. Something about the apology feels unfinished. That's because it is. Narcissistic accountability is always vague on purpose. It contains no details and no commitments. They don't name the behavior, and they don't name the impact. They keep it general so it can be rewritten later. If you bring it up again, they'll say they already apologized. If you ask what they're apologizing for, they'll look confused. That confusion is strategic. Specifics would require reflection, and reflection threatens their identity. So the apology floats away without anchoring to anything real. Then come the people who support their story. These are the friends, the co-workers, the family members who hear the same narrative again and again. They don't notice patterns because they're not looking for them. They don't ask how the narcissist contributes to the chaos. They just validate the emotion being presented. "You've been through so much," they'll say, and the narcissist will nod, comforted. Validation replaces insight. Sympathy replaces accountability. What these supporters don't realize is that narcissistic victimhood does not retire. It rotates. Today, you're the villain. Tomorrow, someone else will be. The narcissist's pain needs a character to carry it. As soon as one person steps out of the role, another steps in. The story stays the same. Only the names change. That's why the pattern never breaks. This is where many people get stuck. They keep thinking if they explain better, stay calmer, or choose their words more carefully, things will improve. But explanation assumes shared reality. Calm assumes safety. Care assumes mutual respect. None of those things are guaranteed here. You are playing a game where the rules change constantly, and the house always wins. There's a moment that happens with a narcissist where you realize every conversation somehow ends in the same place. You start talking about something specific, something real, something that actually happened. 5 minutes later, you're defending your tone, your timing, your intention, and your entire personality. The original issue is gone. It didn't get resolved. It got erased. The narcissist looks calmer as this happens. You look more confused. That imbalance is the tell. A narcissist does not move through conversations in a straight line. They zigzag emotionally while insisting they are being logical. They will rewind the timeline, fast-forward the story, and pause only on the parts where they look good. If you point this out, they'll accuse you of nitpicking. If you stay quiet, they'll accuse you of holding things in. There is no correct response. The goalposts are on wheels, and they enjoy watching you chase them. What makes this dynamic especially draining is that narcissists borrow your seriousness. They use your sincerity against you. You come in trying to resolve something, and they turn it into a courtroom drama where you're suddenly on trial. They don't argue facts. They argue feelings about facts, and feelings are hard to disprove. By the end, you're explaining things that never needed explaining. They're relaxed because they successfully avoided accountability again. Over time, you start second-guessing yourself. You replay conversations in your head looking for where you went wrong. You wonder if you misunderstood. You wonder if you overreacted. You wonder if you expected too much. Meanwhile, the narcissist is not replaying anything. They feel resolved. In their mind, the conversation ended exactly how it should have. That difference matters. This is why narcissistic relationships exhaust thoughtful people. You're constantly adjusting to a reality that won't hold still. You keep trying to land on something solid, and everything shifts beneath your feet. It's not that you're bad at communicating. It's that communication is being used as a smokescreen. Once you see that, the confusion starts making sense, and clarity begins to creep back in. At some point you start noticing how much energy it takes just to exist around a narcissist. Simple moments feel heavy. Small decisions turn into debates. Neutral comments somehow become personal attacks. You begin measuring your words before you say them, not because you're dishonest, but because you're tired of the fallout. Life starts feeling like a constant pre-meeting for conversations that shouldn't need preparation. The narcissist, meanwhile, feels energized by all of this. Emotional tension feeds them. Confusion gives them leverage. The more you try to clarify, the more powerful they feel. They mistake your effort for weakness and your empathy for permission. While you're trying to keep the peace, they're quietly shifting the balance. They are not overwhelmed by the chaos. They are comfortable in it. Chaos feels like home. You'll also notice how often the narcissist reframes themselves as the reasonable one. They'll say things like, "I'm just being honest," or "I'm the only one trying to communicate." They position themselves as mature while portraying you as unstable. This reversal is subtle but effective. Over time, you start questioning your own reactions. You wonder if you really are the problem. That self-doubt is not accidental. It's cultivated. Another strange feature of this dynamic is how quickly the narcissist moves on from conflict. They can argue intensely and then act like nothing happened moments later. You're still processing, still hurt, still trying to understand. They're already relaxed, joking, or distracted. To them, the conflict served its purpose. It redirected responsibility away from them. There's nothing left to examine. Closure, in their mind, already happened. Eventually you realize something important. You are doing all the emotional work. You're reflecting, adjusting, apologizing, explaining, and growing. They are doing none of that. They are repeating the same behaviors with new justifications. Once you see this clearly, the spell weakens. You stop asking how to fix them. You start asking why you've been carrying so much alone. Once that realization settles in, you start seeing patterns you used to explain away. You notice how every disagreement somehow circles back to their feelings. You see how your needs get labeled as demands, while theirs get labeled as boundaries. You watch how they minimize your pain but magnify their inconvenience. The imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. What once felt confusing now feels repetitive. And repetition is easier to recognize than chaos. A narcissist has an impressive ability to rewrite history in real time. Events shift depending on who is listening. What they said yesterday suddenly meant something else today. What they promised becomes a misunderstanding. You remember conversations clearly, but they remember outcomes that favor them. When you try to compare notes, they accuse you of keeping score. Accuracy becomes hostility in their eyes. Consistency feels like an attack. This is also where you begin to notice how rarely they ask real questions. They don't ask to understand you. They ask to gather information they can use later. Conversations are less about connection and more about positioning. They listen just long enough to respond, not to absorb. Curiosity would require humility, and humility doesn't fit their self-image. So dialogue stays shallow even when emotions run deep. The narcissist's favorite role is the misunderstood one. They wear it like armor. Any attempt to clarify becomes proof that people are against them. Any boundary becomes evidence of abandonment. They confuse accountability with rejection. This allows them to avoid growth while demanding endless understanding. The irony is that they want empathy without offering it. They want patience without practicing it. As this becomes clearer, something inside you starts to quiet down. The constant urge to explain fades. You stop trying to correct every misrepresentation. You realize that being understood by them is not the goal anymore. Peace starts to matter more than being right. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but once it starts, it doesn't stop. You are slowly stepping out of the role they assigned you. At this stage, you start noticing how predictable the narcissist actually is, which is funny because they think they're complex. They really believe they're a mystery wrapped in depth. Meanwhile, you can set a watch by their reactions. Bring up an issue, they sigh dramatically. Ask a question, they accuse you of overthinking. Set a boundary, they act like you just cancelled a holiday. The pattern gets so obvious, it's almost comforting. You stop being shocked. You start being entertained. Not because it's funny yet, but because it's repetitive. A narcissist loves saying things like, "Why is everything always my fault?" right after making everything about themselves. That question is never a real question. It's a smoke bomb. The moment they say it, accountability disappears in a cloud of emotion. Suddenly, you're reassuring them. Suddenly, you're explaining your tone. Suddenly, the original issue is gone. They didn't dodge responsibility, they teleported away from it. You're standing there wondering how the conversation ended up on a completely different planet. They also have an impressive talent for selective exhaustion. They're always too tired to talk when the conversation involves your feelings. But somehow they have endless energy to explain why they're misunderstood. They can monologue for an hour about how hard their life is. But the moment you say, "I need something," they're overwhelmed. Emotional availability is always on clearance when it's for you, full price when it's for them, and somehow you're expected to understand that. Another thing that becomes funny once you see it is how seriously they take themselves. Every inconvenience is a tragedy. Every disagreement is a betrayal. Every boundary is an attack. You could ask for basic respect and they'll respond like you requested a personality transplant. The drama level never matches the situation. It's like watching someone react to a paper cut, as if it required a documentary. At some point, you stop trying to lower the volume. You realize the volume is the point. This is also when you notice your sense of humor coming back. You start catching yourself smiling internally during their speeches, not because you agree, but because you already know the ending. They will explain, they will deflect, they will feel wronged, and they will learn nothing. Seeing it coming doesn't fix it, but it does free you a little. Awareness turns frustration into clarity, and clarity is the beginning of your exit. By now you start realizing the narcissist doesn't actually want peace, even though they talk about it constantly. They want relief, not resolution. Relief means the pressure is off them. Resolution would require change, and change would require effort. So they aim for emotional shortcuts. They want the argument to stop, not the pattern. And once you see that, all those "let's just move on" moments suddenly make sense. They are masters of the dramatic reset. A big argument happens, emotions are high, nothing gets resolved, and then suddenly they act cheerful. They talk about dinner. They send a funny video. They behave like the conflict expired overnight. Meanwhile, you're still processing what just happened. You're trying to understand how the conversation ended without actually ending. To them, the reset is the ending. Confusion is closure. This is where the humor really kicks in because you start noticing how rushed they are to feel fine again. They don't reflect, they don't revisit, they don't check in. They just skip straight to "why are you still thinking about this?" Like emotional processing is a personal flaw. They treat memory like it's optional. If they don't feel bad anymore, the issue must be over. Your timeline does not matter. You also notice how allergic they are to follow-up questions. One simple "can you explain what you meant?" can send them spiraling. Suddenly you're interrogating them. Suddenly you're obsessed. Suddenly you're making things complicated. All you did was ask them to finish a thought. But finishing thoughts leads to accountability. and accountability ruins the whole illusion. So, they shut it down fast and call it drama. At this point, the dynamic starts feeling less tragic and more absurd. You're watching someone sprint away from self-awareness like it's chasing them with a clipboard. You realize they spend more energy avoiding growth than most people spend growing. And once you see that clearly, it's hard to unsee it. The situation stops feeling personal. It starts feeling mechanical. And that emotional distance is freedom knocking. Around this point you begin to notice how the narcissist treats boundaries like personal insults. You can say something as simple as, "I need some space," and they'll react like you just announced a lifetime banishment. They don't hear limits, they hear rejection. They don't hear self-care, they hear abandonment. And instead of asking what you need, they immediately start defending themselves against something you never accused them of. A boundary to them is not information, it's a threat. So they respond emotionally instead of practically. That reaction alone tells you everything you need to know. What makes this funny in a sad way is how they insist they love independence. They talk about freedom. They talk about not needing anyone. But the moment you actually detach emotionally, they panic. Suddenly you're distant. Suddenly you've changed. Suddenly you're cold. They only like independence when it's theirs. Yours makes them uncomfortable. It reminds them they're not in control of your inner world anymore. This is also where you realize how much they rely on reaction. They poke, prod, hint and stir just to see if you'll respond. Silence confuses them. Calm unnerves them. A lack of reaction feels like rejection without words. They prefer anger to indifference, because anger still feels like connection. When you stop reacting, the game loses its spark, and they can feel it slipping. You'll also notice how they suddenly become very interested in your emotional state once you stop sharing it freely. When you are open, they dismissed it. When you go quiet, they interrogate it. They ask what's wrong without wanting an honest answer. They want reassurance, not truth. Your inner peace feels suspicious to them. They don't trust it because they didn't create it. This is the stage where detachment becomes real. Not dramatic, not announced, just internal. You stop trying to correct the story they tell about you. You stop defending your character. You realize the version of you they believe in was never you to begin with. And oddly enough, that realization feels lighter than anything you've felt in a long time. By the time you reach this point, something fundamental has changed in you. You are no longer trying to win conversations that were never designed to be fair. You are no longer explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You are no longer auditioning for empathy from a person who treats empathy like a limited resource. Instead, you're watching the pattern from a distance. And from that distance, it starts to look ridiculous. Not painful, not confusing, just ridiculous. That shift is everything. You realize the narcissist didn't steal your peace all at once. They rented it slowly. A little bit of energy here, a little bit of attention there. Every argument, every explanation, every second-guessing moment was a small monthly payment. And you finally cancelled the subscription. No announcement, no dramatic exit speech. Just quiet disengagement. That silence feels louder than any argument you ever had. What's funny is how obvious the whole thing becomes once you step back. The stories repeat, the reactions loop, the victim's speech never updates. Different people, same complaints, same confusion, same conclusion. You start seeing the narcissist as a character stuck in one episode, replaying it forever. Meanwhile, you've moved on to a different season. New perspective, new clarity, new boundaries. The contrast is almost comical. And here's the part nobody tells you enough. You didn't lose anything real. You lost a role you were cast into without your consent. You lost responsibility for someone else's emotions. You lost the job of keeping someone comfortable at your own expense. What you gained was yourself, your clarity, your energy, your ability to laugh again. That's not a loss, that's a return. So if you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own experience, take that seriously. Awareness is not weakness, it's the exit sign. You don't need to prove the truth to people committed to a fantasy. You don't need to be believed by someone invested in being the victim. You just need to step out of the story. And when you do, the whole thing collapses on its own. And that's the breakdown. This is the NARC OPP. If this hit home, make sure you follow, subscribe, like, and share, especially on YouTube. You don't want to miss the lives, the breakdowns, or the real-time healing conversations. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.